Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. Finally, if you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide, available on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Most homeowners don't have the time or expertise to properly take care of their home, which causes costly issues to arise. That's where Kira Home Maintenance comes in. We're a full-service, routine maintenance company that was developed by a certified home inspector. Each quarter, we service our clients' homes following manufacturer's recommendations to properly maintain all the necessary appliances. We provide the materials and expertise to prolong the life of your property, creating a healthy and efficient environment for your family. From top to bottom, we'll maintain and service your home. To get started, we have a property inspection to determine what needs to be maintained, and a maintenance plan is created based on your preferences. From refrigerator coils to filters, vents, and drains, we do it all, and we do it well. Contact us today for your free routine maintenance inspection, and never worry about your maintenance again.
Lindsey Ault-Authier on the Riderflex podcast. Hi, Lindsey. How are you this morning?
Good. How are you?
So that French name, that's your husband is French, or what? Or you're married, or how does all that work?
My parents are originally from Canada. So funny enough, they both were born in Montreal and then moved to Stamford, Connecticut. My mom moved when she moved to Darien, Connecticut when she was like 4 or 5, and my dad moved when he was in his 20s, and then they met, and then they had me, and then my name actually is Alt is my mom, and Authier is my dad.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So it's been that way. I didn't know if that was a married thing or not. So that's been that way
Yeah,
since you were a kid.
since I was a kid. So every first of this, school year, teachers trying to read my name right off. Always a little bit of an awkward moment. So, but yeah, I'm the only one in the world that has my name, which is why I kept it and didn't change my name. So.
Wow. Okay. Now that's pretty cool to be the only person that has that full name. That's pretty cool.
Right. So I was like, this is a pretty cool thing. I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
changing my name.
Wow. All right. That's an interesting fact. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Are your folks still in Connecticut? Are they still with us? How are they doing?
They're great. Yeah, they're in Connecticut still. So I'm in New Jersey now, but I go home and to visit them quite a bit. So they are good.
And are you the only one? Do you have siblings? Well, tell me about the family a little bit.
I am the only one, so I'm an only child. So we always had dogs growing up. So I always joked it was like me and the dogs, golden retrievers. But
Okay. All right.
in terms of kids, I'm the only one. That my parents have.
And what'd your mom and dad do? Give me some background there.
My mom was an English teacher, and my dad was a pulp and paper salesperson. So
Really?
yes.
Interesting. All right. Very good. Both retired.
Mostly. My dad retired, but he's still keeps a few things going. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
And I noticed you had your GPA on your LinkedIn profile as I was preparing. So you at least from college anyway. I'm guessing you had good grades in high school too. Were you straight A student? I'm at the library every Friday night, or was there any rebel in there? Did you have a little fun, Lindsey, or were you straight A kid, like what, straight and narrow, or what? Tell me.
So I was probably a mix. I would say I always had good grades. I would get grades good enough to make honor roll and keep my parents happy. But then I definitely was, I've always been really social. So lots of friends hanging out, some partying a little bit in the teenage years and
Okay.
college. So
Okay.
I always tried to find a balance between, it's important to get good grades. You need to get a degree. And my parents were kind of like, you either get good grades or we're not paying for college. So I was like, all right, well, we got to make that happen. But then I'm also like, you go to school and yes, you're there to learn about academics, but you're also there to make connections and meet people and have a little fun, right? I was like, I got 4 years to hang out on campus. That was it was pretty cool.
Uh,
I feel very fortunate. I didn't have to work. I worked in the summers, but I would, I was able to kind of focus on school full time, and it was fun.
I noticed you were into horses a little bit too when you were in college. Were you into horses when you were in high school too, or was that a college thing? Tell me about that.
I got into horses when I was maybe 10 years old. So I started
Okay.
riding with my best friend, and my entire childhood was horses. So it was like I was either
Oh, I see.
playing with toy horses. I actually used to set up the garbage cans in my back in my driveway so you could jump over them and pretend to be riding.
That's
Which is a
funny.
very horse person thing. And then I was fortunate enough at Fairfield U, I got to ride on the equestrian team, which was awesome. So it was fun to compete. Typically competing can be pretty expensive, but if you do it in college, the program is a lot more affordable per se, because you don't need to have your own horse. You can ride the barn horses. And so yeah, so no, I loved the animals, and I loved riding like from a very young age. So it was horses, horses, horses.
And how about now? Do you have any horses now on a farm somewhere?
I don't. That's actually on my list of things. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I've introduced her to skiing, but I have not introduced her to horseback riding fully. So I'm still debating, because it is an expensive hobby to have.
Yes. Right.
But I would love to have at some point some horses for my daughter and I to ride and experience that. So
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. I saw that. So what were you going to do with that art degree? What were you going to?
I was gonna go be Charlotte from Sex and the City. So I was gonna go work in a gallery and have a cool apartment, and yeah, that was the vision. Work at Sotheby's, Christie's, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That was your plan. All right. Well, that's not a bad plan. I mean, okay. But then somehow somebody said, "Hey, do you want to do some recruiting work?" And you're like, "Yeah, I guess." Is that what happened?
Sort of, yeah. I think it's like a lot of people who get into recruiting, you kind of just fall into it. But it was a friend of mine from college hooked me up with an internship. I was coming back from studying abroad. I had like no money because I spent all my summer money, running around Europe, which was fantastic.
Which
But
is
I
great.
came back. I went to Florence, Italy. So I
Well, we could do a whole podcast on your little journeys over there, I'm guessing.
Yes. I highly recommend it. That is one of the many things I've done, but one of the top things I've done in my life is getting to live.
By yourself? Were you alone?
No, I went to the Fairfield U had a program, so we went as like a cohort of students and lived there, and which was fun because then there was like somebody every weekend. You could be like, "Hey, you want to go to Paris? Okay, let's go."
Very
So
cool.
it was very cool. But when I came back, a girlfriend of mine found me an internship at an executive recruiting firm. They hired a lot of Fairfield Youth students to do a lot of research because they did a lot of business development side of, finding new clients and finding candidates online. And so I interned there, and they paid really well, and it was interesting. Like I wasn't a business major, and I was learning about the pharmaceutical industry. I was learning about finance. I was learning because a lot of their bread and butter was hiring into investment banks and hedge funds, and then into the pharmaceutical companies. So, and then basically when it was time to graduate, I'd had a bunch of internships in galleries and museums, and I'd taken courses and met a lot of people to understand, like, what does it really like to work in this field? What does it feel like? And I really just got the impression that I probably needed to be independently wealthy or wasn't going to make I wasn't, or don't have a big expectation to make a lot of money necessarily. So, and then I actually found too, interesting enough, through the internships, as I mentioned before, I'm very social and I'm an extrovert.
Yes. Yep.
A lot of these jobs, like being in a gallery is really, is cool, but you spend a lot of time sitting alone waiting for like one or two people to come in. And I was like, this is not for me. I was like, and I got to the recruiting agency, and everybody's chatty and you're chatting with candidates. And I was like, all right, this feels like a better a better match. And they offered me my first real job out of college when I graduated. I had two offers, actually. I had an offer for an art gallery, and I had an offer with the recruiting agency. And it was kind of one of those pivotal moments where you're like, all right, which lane am I going? And I was like, I'm going to go with the recruiting. Plus
That's cool.
it paid a more livable livable wage for me. So that
Isn't it interesting how life happens? Like if you hadn't been friends with that particular young lady, and if she hadn't said, "Hey, come do this internship," like who knows? Maybe you never would have. I mean, who knows, right? Like,
No, totally. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I used to work at a candy store, which Deborah Ann's, if you're ever in Richfield, Connecticut, it's a fabulous chocolate shop. And it's
okay,
like,
cool.
I still, hands down, I have not found a better candy store in all of the United States. So, but I'd worked there 6 years, coming back in the summers, but I was like, I really need like not real, like a office job, on my resume. So it was just one of those things where I was coming back and it landed in my lap, and then basically changed the course of kind of where my career went. So
no doubt. Now, okay, so you start working and you're thinking, okay, great, this is cool. I'll do recruiting. And then through your career, we don't have to stop at each job necessarily, but it's like as I study your profile, I'm like, okay, she's recruiting, she's HR, she's people, she's marketing, she's branding. How did the marketing get in the mix in there?
Yeah. That's a great question. And this was so actually the time where I got into marketing, I was at a financial software company, and basically we were trying to hire software engineers.
Okay.
We had a great program where we hired kids right out of college to come in. We had a training program for them, but we were in Norwalk, Connecticut, which is like the middle of nowhere, not middle of nowhere, but it's not New York City. It's not, it's not California. And so a lot of, your top engineers are getting recruited to those areas. And I was just basically like, we've got to get more creative in how we market to students. I was like,
I see.
Right. I was like, if you go online and look at our company, our target audience was, our platform was for investment bankers. So it was very formal website, and the social media was more targeted around that audience. So you didn't see that underneath that was this really cool culture. I call it like Google-esque, like the engineers come in, they did back then, they had flexible hours, they had free lunches, they had the video games. So I was like, we have this really cool culture. Like people are wearing t-shirts and jeans, just like the same kind of vibe, but nobody knows about it. And the pitch used to be too, like, hey, like you could go work for Google and work a ton of hours, or you could come here and have a similar experience, but have more work-life balance. So,
but you didn't know that. You didn't know any of that in the marketing, the way it was setting. I got you.
Exactly. So I pitched to our marketing department at the time. I was like, I want to launch a Twitter account and an Instagram account on careers. And I want to start a Google Hangout series, which is, you could kind of think of it like a webinar today or a podcast.
Cool.
Targeting, highlighting our culture, like showing all the cool things that we do here behind the scenes, different outings and stuff. And then also targeting, like we did hangouts on like, what are the interview tips that you need to land the interview, and how can you best prepare for, a software engineering career and stuff like that. And that's basically how I got into it. And then I found that I really liked it. So I was like, this is this like spot where like recruiting and marketing meet. I was like, this gets me really excited. So
I got you. That's cool.
Yeah. So eventually the woman on the marketing team that I was working with had a role open up, and out of the blue, she sits me down and she's like, would you be interested in moving out of recruiting and coming to work for me? And I was like, yes, that would be amazing. And she was basically like, part of the agreement was I would take the work I'd been doing, the careers, the Instagram, and move it over to the role with me and kind of focus on that more full time. So hence now what I would say is probably more like your recruitment marketing employer branding of today, right? Like my role was to get our associates excited about working there and to help recruits want to come work for us. So you promoting things on the TVs, writing intranet articles, writing social posts when we win an award, like all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I quit. Yeah.
Which is still needed I mean, that's a thing, right? Like how to brand your company properly in the marketplace to make people want to work there. I mean, almost every company I deal with needs that, right? What is that? What is that? What is that official title now? How would you bucket yourself in a title? Is it chief? Well, how would you say it? Are you chief employment branding officer? Just I'm thinking of you as a title, right? Is that how do you bucket yourself now?
I use employer brands and talent attraction as kind of the two phrases. And talent attraction kind of opens it up a little bit beyond just the employer brand, because the employer brand is, kind of the perception and your EVP to your associates and
Okay.
candidates. But then there's all the other pieces that come into that candidate journey. And when people are assessing you both internally and externally online, right? Do I want to stay working here? Do I not? Do I want to come work here? Do I not? Like, what does that all look like? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say I would call that like, I mean, it's, I guess you could say chief, but director of employer branding.
Yeah. It's needed almost in every company I think I've ever dealt with, because most companies, they don't spend time on it, especially if they're just trying to survive. Excuse me. A lot, especially small to medium sized businesses that are just grinding every day. They're like, okay, well, how much cash do we have in the bank today? What's our 13-week cash flow look like? And then somebody comes into the CEO's office and they're like, hey, let's talk about branding and company culture. And the CEO's like, yeah, well, right now I'm just trying to figure out how to make payroll in 2 weeks. So I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. And and quite honestly, this space kind of like went from like, look, when I started recruiting, it was over the phone, right? You would get a call
Yes.
list, or
Yeah.
you put an ad in the New York Times, like that
Yes.
was recruiting. And it's gone from that to now you have like Glassdoor where you get ranked and people leave reviews. And now you've got like
Yes.
LinkedIn. All of these sites have, need branding, like they need header images, they need
Yes.
logos, they need copy, they need
Yep.
people to manage them. So it's like this whole space kind of exploded. And I could see like as a business owner, it's only really when it starts to go wrong, when you want to go hiring and people look you up, that they're like, oh, maybe we want to like think about this.
That's
But
right.
right. But there's a lot
Uh,
of research out there now about tying, the candidate to the consumer, right? Your
mhm.
candidate is thinking necessarily, depending on what your business is, like, oh, this is the recruiting process, so it's okay if it's okay. Right? They're looking at you holistically as a
That's right.
brand company and saying like, is this a good company to buy
Yep.
from and to work for? So it's more and more becoming, I think, even more important, in terms of like a company's reputation.
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Even Riderflex as a recruiting firm ourselves, I'll get recruiters that'll ping me and say, hey, they'll say, hey, I want to come, be a recruiter for you. And I'll always say, why? Like, how'd you even find us? Why Riderflex? You could be a recruiter for anybody. Why would you, why? And they're like, oh, well, I saw your Glassdoor. I saw your reviews. I saw your social media. I saw your podcast. Well, I saw so yeah, they're absolutely looking at how you feel and how you, enter the marketplace with your branding. It definitely matters. Absolutely matters. It's super critical.
Right. And what your job is is one of those big top 3 life decisions, right? And it's, I always equate it to like a marriage. I mean, you're spending so much time there, the people you're
Oh,
working
yes.
with, like the
Yes.
reputation, your ability to get your next job, like all that stuff is tied up in that. So it's sometimes we forget too, I think on the recruiting side, because you've got volumes of candidates, right? Forget that when you're coming down to it, this person is deciding whether they're going to, work for you or not work for you. So it's the more information you can have also to make sure that's a right fit, better, because once you get in, it gets much more complicated if it's not the right fit. So
You've been at PVH Corp, which owns Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. And do they own anything else, or is that the two? Is that the only two brands?
those are the two main iconic brands that they
Okay.
own. So.
Okay. So PVH Corp owns those two. And of course, you're dealing with e-commerce, wholesale, retail, all three revenue streams, which is always fun. How did you get to PVH Corp? Or did you get recruited? Speaking of recruiting, did a recruiter call you? How'd you get over there?
I did. I got recruited on LinkedIn through an
Okay.
email from a recruiter during the pandemic when everybody, employer branding became a very hot job during the pandemic. So it was, a
Yes.
really competitive candidate market. So a lot of companies were like, we need somebody. And, one thing I love about employer branding is it translates to all industries, companies, like you can do it all different places. So it's not necessarily tied to one industry and I like learning new things too. So PVH reached out and they had a very competitive offer at the time. And, quite frankly, going back to that art history degree, I had worked a lot in finance and tech, and
I
I
see.
really, I really wanted to get back into a more creative space. I love fashion. Like I remember, I've been watching Fashion Week virtually online for 10 years. Like I get on and one of these days I'm getting an invite to an actual fashion show, but in the meantime, you can watch a lot of it online. And I always just thought it was really, really interesting. So the idea that I could work for
I see.
PVH, who owns Calvin and Tommy, and like get to be in a creative space. And then I also thought like I could take employer branding to like a whole other level here in terms of like if we could weave the brands into it truly into and make it stronger. They have such, we've got a lot of the top talent out there modeling for us and
Yes.
on behalf of us, like putting themselves out there. So what a cool way to kind of connect the employer brand potentially and do some really neat campaigns that could really elevate things to like a whole other level was kind of the appeal of coming to PVH for me. And then also I'll put a plug in for my boss. He had a great background and I really thought I could learn from him. So he's seasoned TA professional and he's also had a lot of experience in different areas. So I was like that. Also, as I feel like my career has gone on, that becomes more and more even important, right? It's like, who am I going to work for and
Yes.
what am I going to
Critical.
learn from them and
Yes.
our relationship going to be like? And so I felt like we had a really good connection and I thought his background was something I could learn from. So
If you had to force rank what you like the best, recruiting, HR, marketing, ops. So let's go with those four. What do you rank number one as your favorite?
marketing.
I figured.
I love the marketing. Second is operations, but only out of necessity because my marketing campaigns can only be as good as like the tech and the process and the things behind it. I learned that early on, like you can run a campaign and drive a ton of leads in, but is anybody reviewing them? Can the candidates apply? Like, can you measure what you're doing? So it's just to really show the success of the work that you're doing, you have to have that operational piece as well. So I've kind of built that skill, but I prefer to be in the creative space, thinking of like, what's a cool way we could get in front of people? How could we get something catchy? Stuff like that.
One of the things I used to like to do to my marketing people, I don't know if you know, before I started Riderflex, I was in charge of a couple of smaller $40 million companies I ran as a CEO. One of them was an apparel company. And I used to love it. Now, this is back in, this is earlier, right? This would be 06, I guess. And I used to love marketing people would come into my office and they'd be like, it was a really successful campaign. Everybody loved it. They're just really happy. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, great, yeah, cool. Well, so how do you know it was successful? Well, everybody just said it was great. I know, but is there any data? Do you have any results? Do you have any reports? Like what, does it just feel good or can you show me anything?
But 100%. And look, sometimes brand is hard to fully quantify, but
It is. It
there
is.
are metrics, right? There are things you can always look at. Are you getting website traffic? Are you getting, leads? Are you getting social engagement? Like
Right.
everything now, it's almost too much data at times. You've got it everywhere.
True. Good point.
Pulling it all together and trying to really truly see where your opportunities are can be a little overwhelming, but there's definitely data. And I actually learned that early on in my marketing career. I had a boss who was consistently like, well, what's the business outcome of this? What do we think we're going to get from this?
Yeah. Yeah.
How will we know? And I think it's a great mindset to take. I've taken that with me everywhere I go. It's like, if we're going to be doing something, we need to make sure that it's impactful Employer brand teams are typically not like 1,600 people with somebody doing each piece of it. So you have to really prioritize and focus on the key things that are going to move the needle. And you need the data to help you figure out which are those things that you really need to look at. So
couldn't agree more. All right, I want to ask you about some fun topics.
okay.
Some fun topics. You ready?
Yes.
Let's start with retail health. We're recording this on May 9th, 2024. So Express filed for bankruptcy, Route 21 filed for bankruptcy. We got. How are you feeling about retail in general? And then maybe break that down into apparel retail. Like, how are you feeling? I mean, I did notice that the stock is fine at PVH from what I can tell. Like, I don't see any numbers that would scare me necessarily if I was looking at PVH on the surface. But just how are you feeling about retail in general?
I think that look, the change in terms of having online, right, has had a massive impact on the entire industry in terms of where you buy your clothes or anything, right? Like I'm on Amazon all the time, getting shipped to my house, So I do feel like it's a time where, the entire, which is not, look, Amazon's not net new today, but I think there's still that kind of how do you compete and how do you as a brand, stay relevant, stay in business?
Yep.
How do you kind of manage, the brick and mortar component with the online component? How do you balance all those things? And I think even today, though, I would say I do feel optimistic in the sense that, I think if you have a cool brand and you've got cool clothes, you're going to have, there's a place for that. And I think too, while there's a lot online and there's a lot of AI, I think there's always going to be that human element of wanting to go into a store and wanting to try it on. And I also think that, there's some cool enhancements that I think, I've heard a lot of cool things about, AI and being able to try on your clothes at your home and like getting a better idea for fit. And I think that's going to make it interesting, but I still think I feel like overall optimistic in terms of retail in general that, it's going to evolve and change what it looks like, I think, in terms of the how we purchase our clothes and what those components are. But I think that, overall, I feel, look, there are companies that, if you don't get that balance right, I feel like it's not going to work. Right. So it's definitely a change period. So, and I think at the end of that, there's some people that, kind of make it out and then there's an evolve and then there's others that, that don't. So.
You sound cautiously optimistic. That's how I would describe your answer.
Like AI is everywhere, right? It's like AI taking all our jobs and
yeah, let's get into that. That's next on my list. That's a good segue. But before we go down the AI path, yeah, the brick and mortar piece, I think definitely is, we'll see. I mean, the wholesale obviously is there, the e-commerce is there, and I think I'm sure that your executives are pushing that as like, here's the safe zones. Let's drive wholesale and e-commerce. Boy, the brick and mortar, let's be careful about how much we expand there because of like you said, and I've had some people on the podcast that actually are CEOs of these companies that you stand in front of the computer and it tells you if the shirt fits and blah, blah, blah. And you can switch your outfits and all this stuff. And that technology is going to do nothing but get better. Like it's not going to get worse. I always hate when people are like, yeah, but this technology or that with any technology, people be like, yeah, well, it's not perfect. And I'm like, yeah, well, talk to me in 6 months because it's getting better every week. So, and I did have, here's one of the things I think about. I was in music retail for a long time. So I was in music retail. I was a district manager and a regional manager for music retail back when you had to go to the mall to buy your music. And our CEO would stand up there and he'd be like, people are always going to want to go to the music stores. It's a lifestyle. They're always going to want to come into the store and talk to the associates and shop the racks. That's just being human, and people are always going to want to do that. And meanwhile, me and the guys were sitting out in the audience, and then we're going, okay, well, does he not know that every college student on the planet is downloading music right now, and they don't
Napster.
care? Yeah. Napster, it was big. And so I kind of tie that into the same thing. Like, I hear people say, well, humans are always going to want to go to the store. And my wife used to say the same thing. When she found out she could get Kroger delivered to the house, she used to say the same thing. She'd be like, yeah, but I like going to the store and walking the aisles. Well, guess what? 70% of the time now, Kroger gets delivered to our house and she never goes anymore. So, I don't know. It's,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't,
that's a fair point. I mean, as a mom, I get everything delivered for the most part. I have my groceries delivered. I have DoorDash. I have my
yeah,
fast food delivered. I get a lot delivered online. But I do still like, and I think it's maybe too in more of like the luxury space. Like when you go to buy like a
yeah,
really cool product, like
yeah.
there is still something to going in. But I mean, I had my MacBook shipped through Instacart to my house. So,
Yeah,
to your point around those changes. And I think that's where it's, like even look at like Kodak Film or Blockbuster or, there's, yeah, you think way back to like cars, right? There was horse and buggies, and then I'm sure those people were like, oh, cars will never take off. And now it's like,
totally. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And now it's like
yeah.
a whole new world of not even new. It's a world where we have cars that can drive themselves, so it's totally that, I think. So
We'll
I think
see.
yeah.
Do you think AI, let's talk about AI a little bit broader now. I mean, what a world we're living in, Lindsey. I mean, damn, as a recruiter, of course, as a recruiting firm, we're trying very hard to keep up with the tools okay, here's a new tool. Okay, will this make us faster? Will this make us more efficient? What can this tool do? What can that tool do? I'm trying to implement AI while keeping the human element. And we're trying to balance that to make sure, okay, well, we're not just going to hire people from the robot perspective, but I am going to use the robot technique to do this and this, and then I'm going to put the human element in here and I'm going to combine it. But damn, staying up with it is, I mean, every day I wake up, I'm like, okay, well, here's something else. Okay, I just, it's moving at
Wait.
light speed, isn't it? I mean, when you hear Elon Musk and these people saying, yeah, we're all going to be on universal basic income and robots are going to do everything. Like, what are your thoughts? I'm just curious. What are your thoughts?
Um, I've thought about this quite a bit because I was, I think when ChatGPT came out, and
Oh,
especially
man.
I'm a marketer, right? I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my God, this thing is going to do everything. And,
Yeah.
uh, I, but I find like for me, ChatGPT is great, but it needs a lot of coaching. Feels like an employee that you need to
Yeah.
coach along and get it to where you need it to be.
Yeah.
So I think with anything, I feel like I've been through a couple of these like big moments in tech where they're like, the world's gonna end, like Y2K. Like you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I guess
Uh,
I do see things changing, and I'm not sure if it's going to be quite that vision of like we're completely useless. I think it's
yeah.
going to change our jobs, that are available. But like with any tech, like I mean, there's still that, you hear people talking about like they're going to take over and they could get as smart as a human and if not smarter, which maybe, but I feel like I don't know, at least so far, I feel like there still needs to be that human touch to a lot of things, and that I can't just set as of today ChatGPT to just write all my social posts and auto post them out, right?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I would still need that gut check of experience, context, that I think that I've learned from just being on the earth this long, and I don't know. I feel optimistic about it. And maybe I'll be
Would
wrong.
you,
Maybe in 10 years are gonna come back to me and be like,
would you,
Lindsey.
would you do this? And I think this is coming actually. If you had an AI agent, okay, let's say there's a little face on screen, or maybe it's even an autonomous robot standing right next to you, or it's on your screen, and you had an agent that was Lindsey's agent that knew you pretty well, and you were just like Sally, listen, I was on a treadmill this morning and I had some ideas for some social media posts. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. Here's my idea. And I'm kind of thinking this. What do you think about that? And then she's talking to you. She gives you some feedback, and then you're like, yeah, that's cool. Okay, do me a favor. Will you go ahead and put out 2 posts on that today with Facebook and LinkedIn, and then on Twitter, change it up and do this other post. Can you take care of that for me? Okay, cool. Thank you. Like, I think I actually think that's coming pretty soon.
It is, and I've chatted a lot. I thought about this in terms of like, what is this going to do to a human? So, like when I reflect on life, right, in general, when I think about society, I'm like, we have more available to us in the United States than we ever have before. I have an
Yes.
Alexa. I have
Yep.
lights that turn on with voice control. I have Instacart, right? But then when you
Yes.
look at the rates of like happiness, like people are
Isn't that
depressed
interesting?
and they're suicidal. And I think that at higher levels, and you're like, how is it that we have all of this? Like people are, there are people that are, food insecure and hungry, but there are a lot of people that aren't, that
Mhm.
have their basic needs met, that are just miserable. And I think there's going to be a somewhere in here in this change is like,
Mm.
yes, the robot can do these things, but
Mhm.
we get some of our pride from work, right?
Mhm.
Working, discipline,
Purpose.
working out,
Purpose.
purpose, right? So I think there's going to be some sort of component in there where as a human race, we're going to have to really look at our consciousness of like,
Yep.
right? Like, okay, so we have these things, but we're miserable. So what are we doing? And I'm generalizing here, but like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's great that there's all this AI, but at some point, are we going to flip to a spot where we're like, okay, but we matter to each other as a community, as a human race, and how do we focus in on, instead of this constant like, feel like external validation of needs coming to you, how do we go inside and derive our own happiness? I'm getting a little philosophical here, but like, I think AI is going to push that issue with humans. And I think it's something that we need to think about in line with that is, okay, so you outsource everything to this robot. What are you doing all day? You know?
That
Feel by
whole
yourself, you know?
everything that you just described there, let's bucket it under AI integration or AI transition or AI transitional change. I think I think everything you said is actually going to create a whole new set of jobs and professions,
Yes.
probably where people will be like, listen, I'm an AI transitional coach, or I'm an AI or whatever, to help with those types of things you just talked about. Because there is going to be a lot of change, and there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate on how we should be handling it, and regulations and all kinds of stuff. I think that's going to happen. I think the unhappiness piece, by the way, not to drill down too far on that, but I think so much of that comes from younger people, especially looking at the perfect person or who they think is perfect, and then they start feeling bad that that's not them. I think a lot of it, you almost need to, when I see the Walton's family, what is it? One of the Walton daughters, I saw a picture of her yacht or whatever, parked in Miami or whatever, this giant yacht. I can't remember. I saw it on a post or whatever. And I see the yacht. I'm like, wow, it'd be cool to own a yacht like that, You almost need the AI to tell you, like, hey, Steve, it's okay. 99% of the people on the planet are like you. So it's okay. Don't feel bad. Like, you almost need a reinforcement.
Yeah, like stop comparing, your insides to someone else's outsides, right? Like how many people have these
Yeah.
beautiful families and then 2 years later they're divorced. You're like, but you just posted all these images. And I think our subconscious just picks up on that from social,
That's
right?
right.
It's just patterning in there and it's just telling us like this is how it should be. This is how other people are, as opposed to like that's not the reality of
That's
what
not
it
the
is.
reality. Yeah.
No. So yeah, actually I could use, a little buddy who's like,
Yeah.
don't let me repeat back
Have
what's reality
you,
to you,
speaking of the little buddy, have you heard of this new one called Pi, Pi?
No. What's this
Okay.
one?
All right. This is, it's kind of like that. I saw let's test something real quick. Um, Hey, I'm feeling a little depressed right now. Tell me how awesome I am. Make me feel better.
Hey, Steve, let's pump you up a bit. You're an absolute rock star. You're a successful entrepreneur, podcaster, philanthropist, and book author. You've got a fantastic family filled with talented and ambitious individuals. And let's not forget your tight-knit friendship with Don Merrick, where you bond over makers, mark bourbon shots at Cassidy's Bar and Grill. You're kicking butt in all aspects of your life. Don't forget that.
Uh,
Oh, I love this.
yeah, right. I know. Somebody turned me on to that one. I was like, okay, this is cool. Anyway, where were we? We went down a rabbit hole. Oh, yeah, AI can be harmful, but let's make sure it's making people feel good too and feel positive and be a buddy. So yeah, where will we all be on universal basic income and have a life of abundance? I don't know. Before we move off of this topic, I would say, I think what I'm worried about is the short term. I actually think long term we'll figure it out.
Yes.
It's this immediate short term where we have to go through all this transition, and there will be job loss and change, and so it gets really messy during this short period where it's like, oh shit, and all this is happening. We're trying to figure it out. I see problems.
Yeah.
I think eventually we figure it out, but short term I'm worried.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, I think do you have kids?
Yes,
yourself?
they're all grown. They're all grown, but yes, yeah. Four
Yeah,
of
I
them.
mean, I have an 8-year-old, so when I look at her and I think about her future and like I think about the amount of social media, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't have that as a teenager. Oh my God. I'm like, I can't even imagine. Ashton Kutcher did a TikTok on it saying how back when he was a star, when he was younger, you could go out and nobody knew. And it's like by the time
this is great.
right? Like right now it's like they know exactly when you left. They're videoing you if you get too drunk or whatever. And like that is then stamped on the internet for your employer to find 10 years later. You know,
Yes.
That to me is where I'm like, wow, like this is I feel like we've tipped the scales. Like this was supposed to be originally like Facebook was just supposed to be fun. Like right? Like now it's like this tracking of humans and yeah. So that to me as well, I feel a little bit worried for like my daughter going through this. Like, how do you equip these people? And especially when you didn't live it yourself, right? I'm like, I didn't go through these things. I don't know. I'm going to be making this up.
So speaking of your 8-year-old daughter, do you each have one child, and are you married? What's your family situation?
I have one kid. I am not married. I have a life partner, boyfriend that in my life, and yeah.
Okay, great. So the one child, let me ask you, because this is interesting. This is a good challenge. This is my new challenge. I like to ask people this. If she brings home homework and she wants to use ChatGPT to get some answers and complete it, are you okay with that?
Probably not. It probably depends. Like probably for me, I'm like, I want her to learn, right? There's value in learning on your own and figuring out problem solving.
Okay.
I think where it gets a little sticky is if part of the problem solving is doing it faster on ChatGPT. I don't know if I would fully discourage that as the solution, depending on what the homework is. You know, if it's you need to learn how to write and then ChatGPT does the whole thing, that's a disservice to you. But if you have a big math problem and you need to figure out a few little things to get to the bigger science project and this will make it go faster, maybe that's better, you know? So I guess it would depend on the what you're doing.
Okay. Here comes the challenge. You ready for this? Okay. So is it okay for her to have a calculator to do math? Or do you want her to do long division, handwritten math on paper, or can she use a calculator?
This is a good question.
You see where I'm going, right?
It's a tough one. You know, they told us
Is it okay for her to use spell check on Microsoft Word?
Well, yeah.
See, people go to, I've heard people say this, right, in their minds that, they're like, well, ChatGPT is kind of like cheating or whatever. I'm like, okay, well,
what is
if you want to eliminate AI, let's go all the way back to all these other tools we're using that we now think are fine. But
Yes.
because this new tool is so big and new and scary, haven't decided whether or not it's okay to use it. Something, and I see that, and I'm like, somebody told me that the other day. They said, well, I would never use ChatGPT to enhance my resume. And I said, but it's okay to pay a resume writer, like another human being, to enhance it. That's okay.
I'm with you. I feel like if there's a tool that can make me faster and better at my job,
Bingo.
why not? Why not?
That's exactly how I feel. You just summed it up on the way I feel. And I heard a guy say this on the other podcast. He said, the way he said it was, he said, if there was a tool that could make you more intelligent and faster and more efficient, why wouldn't you use it?
Exactly. And I think it does get a little stickier with learning. Like I do want my daughter to be able to think and like do a basic math problem, but like it's more about the figuring out, learning how to problem solve rather than like if ultimately the tool is going to do it better and faster, put her brain to this problem instead of that problem, right? Like,
and I think to move away from that topic, to wrap that one up, because I want to ask you about another topic. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be who can ask the best question. I think it will be who's got the creative mind to ask AI the next question. And okay, let me prompt you. And so it's that creative young lady, this is the creative 8-year-old that can ask the next best question to get the next best answer. Even, you know what I mean? I think, but anyway, all I know is we are living in a fascinating time. It's really unbelievable.
And I've always been a big fan of technology. I'm usually like more on the early adopter side. I like
me
to
too.
like something's cool, I want to download it. And a lot of the organizations I've been at, I've launched the initial Instagram, Snapchat, live stream. Like I'm the one who's doing those things because I love it. I think it's really
me too. I will say the first time I used ChatGPT, I don't know if you remember the first moment you used it, but the first time I opened it up and I used it, I called my co-founder, Scott, Scott that works with me, Scott Kegris. I called Scott. I'm like, holy fucking shit. I'm scared.
I'm telling you, I remember when it was like November 23 or 22, 22. I don't know. Anyway, when it came out, like when the big hoorah came out about it, and I started watching a ton of videos online.
Oh yeah, me too.
The world ending, like what is it going to happen here? And I got like I took some AI classes because I was like, all right, like I've got to be up on this. And I think ultimately now I feel more like it's going to be a tool that helps us rather than taking the world. But
yeah. So far it helps. It's helping me. Speaking of that, so like I kind of touched on this earlier, we're busy trying to implement as many tools as we can in the recruiting process with keeping the human element in there. Right now, as of today, I'm guessing your answer will change. My answer will probably change too as this thing moves along. But as of today, how comfortable are you with AI in the mix? Like, I'm assuming you're fine with AI scanning the resumes and picking resumes out of the pile. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Would you be comfortable with an AI agent doing the first round interview to check boxes before it goes to a human? Would you go there?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the job. I mean, some of the basic recruiter screen, right, it's the same handful of questions that you're getting every time. And I think that especially with the salary transparency becoming more of a norm, I think if you that becomes more of a closer match, and you're just gathering that initial, like, are you willing to do this, this, and this? I think there could be a place for that. I think there's always then going to be kind of need that initial. Sometimes there's more story. Like I think about it, like for me, I'm like, if I were to do an initial screen and put my salary down, I'm like, but I might take less to work from home full time.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
and it could be not significantly, but I'm like,
Yep.
there may be a miss there. But I would say overall, I feel like for that basic information grabbing, like if there's a faster way, I don't know.
So
And
I'm kind of, yep.
have you done any of those coordinators that schedule you through like it's a bot, like online,
I have not done that. Now I am using, we're using two things. I'll tell you what we are doing. We're using MetaView as our note taker with, so now I never take notes when I'm talking to a candidate again, handwritten, because it records the whole conversation. And as soon as I hang up, it spits back to me the entire transcript with a summary, all recorded. And I can ask it questions. I can be like, what did John say about blah, blah, blah? I forgot. And boom, it'll tell me. I'll send it to you. It is,
I gotta check this out.
it is absolutely my new favorite tool. And it will just recap my entire conversation from the candidate. And check this out. So I will, let's say I interviewed Johnny and I loved him. Okay. I'm like, all right, I'm going to present Johnny to Tommy. So right after the call, I will take Johnny's resume and then I will take the MetaView notes that it took from my conversation. And then I'll take the job description and I'll put all three into ChatGPT and say, prepare my candidate presentation. Done. Within, now, yes, you have to check it. Yes, you need to proof it. You need to look at it. But all of that would take, an
immense amount of time.
And the other thing we're doing this is we are asking candidates to do a self-video interview first round. So let's say if you send a resume in, it'll be like, thank you so much. Hey, next steps are, can you do a quick 5-minute self-record for 3 basic questions? And we're asking them to do that. Now, we are not eliminating candidates if they don't want to. And there's a big disclaimer that says, hey, if you're not cool doing this, just let us know and we'll call you. And then we'll get that video in and then we can take a quick look and they'll answer some basic questions, salary, those the 3 or 4 knockout questions. And if they answer those knockout questions wrong, then I don't have to waste 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes talking to them. So then they've already done the knockout on the video. Then I will get on. So we're easing into it. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Like, what are your thoughts in general?
Yeah. I think for me, I also try to think about like the candidate experience on that end of it too. Right. It's like it's more convenient for the recruiter, but I don't know about you. For me to apply to a job, I feel like I have to give my entire life story, some personal information about myself, like my salary, my address, my phone number, and never hear back. So
right.
Right. So I feel like for me now, there was one job I was looking at, it asked for that. And I was like, for me, I was a little bit like, I was like, like, I would like to have an initial conversation before I spend, the time recording it and then saying it. Now, I think if you could, maybe you have a, more efficient candidate experience, if you could make it in a way that it is, the candidate gets a call back or like, you ensure they have a good experience. But I don't know. I feel like we're asking a lot of candidates. We don't ask this stuff of consumers when they go to buy something on Amazon, right? So that's kind of my my lens. I don't know if when's the last time you were on the job market? Like I always like to ask, because sometimes, I work with people and they haven't applied for a job in like 10 years. And I'm like, if you truly need a job, like, and you need to make, I changed jobs in 2008 and in the financial industry. So no one was hiring, right? So I was ready for my next gig, but the world was not. And I applied to hundreds of jobs. Do you know what I mean? And I did not hear back from anybody.
Yes.
That's my lens on it.
Yeah, we're
definitely to rule it all out, but
I'm definitely super sensitive around it. I'm testing it. I'm trying it. I even have and I know we're almost out of time. I even have a video. There's a video message from me saying, "Hey, look, don't worry, this is real.
That's cute.
This is not like a fake thing where we're going to take your face and put it on, movies and stuff like what it's okay. Like, it's okay."
Yeah.
even
with it, do it in a way where it's warm and it feels like a nice experience. I don't think that's such a bad thing to have, a video clip of people and
so we're testing. It's going to be interesting. I could talk to you for now. I have like 50 more questions I wanted to ask you, but I know we're out of time. So what's the future for Lindsey? Chief something?
Yes, definitely chief something.
Chief something.
Something. I got to tell you, I'm actually I've actually been thinking about that a lot in terms of my own career, because employer branding is kind of a niche marketing type of a role, and typically you kind of cap out around like maybe like a director or a VP, and then you're kind of a lifer, and you do employer branding for life.
Good point.
Or
Good point.
you could leverage it into an HR track or a marketing track. So I think for me, I've been kind of mulling it around, and you'd asked me earlier in the call, like my preferences, right? Marketing falling above kind of everything else. So probably maybe a chief marketing officer, or even, maybe if we're looking way down the road, maybe running my own company to,
Do you have you got a little entrepreneurial bug in there? You got a little
bug. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
My dad ran his own business for 15 years.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
So that is also, maybe when my daughter's a little older, and in the back of the mind, be something.
I know this cool little recruiting firm called Riderflex that has this old guy who would love to kind of like not be in charge and have a younger, dynamic, super powerful person come run it. Maybe we can talk about that offline. It's been a pleasure, Lindsey. Thank you very much for visiting with us on the Riderflex podcast. Sorry I kept you up right up to the hour here. I'm sure you have another meeting, but thank you.
Thank you. This was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you having me on. So.